Every village in Britain used to have one, sometimes three. The same regulars on the same stools, the same landlord who knew your father before he knew you, a fire in the corner that had not gone out since before the war. The pub was not entertainment, it was infrastructure. It was where the darts team met, where the funeral wake was held, where the football results were argued over on a Saturday, and the whole street turned up regardless of whether they even liked beer. In 1980, Britain had over 69,000 pubs. Today, fewer than 39,000 remain. On current rates, one closes every day. This is not a story about people drinking less. It is a story about what happens when a building stops being able to pay for the community it holds. During the post-war boom of the mid-20th century, the British pub operated under a system that bound breweries, communities and local neighbourhoods together in a predictable, self-sustaining loop. Under the tied house structure, the big six national breweries, Allied, Bass, Courage, Scottish, and Newcastle, Watney Man, and Whitbread, owned and managed the vast majority of the nation's licensed properties. At their peak in the late 1970s, these national giants controlled 40,000 licenses across the country. Landlords were not transient managers, they were embedded community figures, often running the same taps for decades, becoming as familiar to the locals as the school or the post office. In the industrial coalfields of Northumberland, this social connection went even deeper. Here, mining companies built public houses directly alongside the pitheads as essential welfare infrastructure for their workforces. The Colliery Inn at Pegswood, constructed by the Northumberland Coal Company in the 1950s, was designed specifically to serve the miners of the Pegswood pit. It was a space where the daily rhythm of the village was set by the shared schedule of the shift change, rather than individual choice. Sunday lunches at the Colliery Inn brought multi-generational families together, creating a shared social rhythm. Darts leagues competed weekly, and the pub worked in lockstep with the adjacent working men's club to coordinate local events and weekend tournaments. In these mining towns, the public house functioned as a physical extension of both the workplace and the family home. For the regulars who gathered there day after day, this network of tied houses, structural continuity, and familiar publicans felt entirely permanent, a solid, unshakable foundation of British civic life that seemed completely immune to the passing of time. On December 19, 1989, the British government passed the supply of beer orders to break up the vertical monopoly of the national brewers. The legislation forced any brewer owning more than 2,000 pubs to divest their excess properties, forcing 10,791 pubs onto the market. Designed to foster competition, the policy instead triggered a structural shift. Newly formed property companies known as pubcos rapidly acquired these divested estates. Corporations like Enterprise Inns and Punch Taverns became the new power centres, purchasing thousands of freeholds while keeping the profitable supply tie intact. Under these new commercial leases, landlords faced stricter terms than under the old brewery model. According to tenant reports compiled by the Campaign for Real Ale, some publicans paid a premium of roughly £70 per barrel, up to 70% more than free-of-tie competitors. The reform changed ownership without removing vulnerability, making the local pub less viable before customer footfall even began to decline. The legislative timeline unfolded in rapid succession. Scotland banned indoor smoking in 2006, Wales followed in April 2007, and England implemented the restriction on July 1, 2007. While designed to protect public health, the ban intensified the pressure on a struggling industry. Wet-led pubs without outdoor gardens, working men's clubs, and community locals felt the sharpest early impact. Regulars who once paired a pint with a cigarette increasingly chose to drink elsewhere. Within the first 2 years, affected venues saw a 10 to 20% drop in trade. The British Beer and Pub Association later reported that more than 2,000 closures were linked directly to those first 2 post-ban years. In the mid-1990s, supermarkets began using cheap alcohol as a loss leader to attract shoppers. This sparked a widening affordability gap. By the 2010s, supermarket beer was nearly 3 times more affordable than 30 years prior, enabling stores to sell a 4-pack of lager for less than a single pub pint. This price gap drove a massive shift in drinking habits. Home consumption overtook pub drinking by volume during the 2010s. The local pub's main competitor was no longer the tavern down the road, but the living room. To curb this, Scotland introduced minimum unit pricing in May 2018, and Wales followed in March 2020. Yet England adopted no national policy, leaving English publicans permanently exposed to a structural price disadvantage. The survival of a pub is heavily governed by a commercial property tax system known as business rates. According to the British Beer and Pub Association, 1 in every £3 spent in a pub goes directly to taxes, creating an average annual burden of £140,000 per venue. Unlike standard retail, these business rates are assessed on a property's rateable value, an estimate of its potential rent and trading capacity. Industry advocates argue this formula is disconnected from trading reality. Under this system, a quiet village pub turning over £250,000 a year can face a rateable value of £30,000. This is the same assessment applied to a high-turnover city centre coffee shop, generating £1.2 million. The tax burden is identical, but the profit margins are worlds apart. This pressure eventually collides with the sheer value of British real estate. When a pub struggles to cover its fixed costs, the physical building becomes its most valuable asset. For freeholders, the economic case for keeping the bar open collapses when compared to the housing market. An independent owner facing a modest annual trading profit of £30,000 might receive a residential conversion offer of over £1 million. At this point, the business case for the pub is entirely replaced by its property value, making closure a rational financial decision that nostalgia cannot stop. While the economic squeeze is felt across Europe, Britain's pub closures far outpace those of its continental neighbours. In Germany, strong municipal lease protections and inheritance tax concessions limit Wirtshaus losses to fewer than 200 venues annually, maintaining a density of over 4 establishments per 1,000 people. Ireland's restricted off-licence hours stabilise its local trade, while Belgium and the Netherlands preserve higher tavern densities through flexible zoning and favourable commercial rent structures. Yet the United Kingdom lacks any national protective framework equivalent to France's historic café heritage listings, leaving its independent venues directly exposed to the raw financial pressures of the real estate market. Today, the physical shells of closed pubs map the rapid change of the British streetscape. Across towns and villages, these historic properties are converted into residential flats or repurposed as brightly lit Tesco Express and Co-op convenience stores. Many simply stand empty, decaying behind boarded windows. Where pubs do survive, the market has split. Large chains like JD Wetherspoon use massive scale to offer low prices, leaving independent publicans unable to compete on drink prices. To survive, remaining rural venues must transition into food-led destination businesses, dependent on tourists and weekend diners rather than daily local trade. Yet even after the hanging signs and brass taps are stripped away, the distinctive architecture of these buildings remains instantly recognizable. Their preservation as shops or housing masks a quieter, more permanent structural loss, the disappearance of the neighbourhood's primary social anchor. As public houses vanish, we lose the physical infrastructure of connection. The ultimate cost is not economic, but a growing, quiet isolation. If this story interested you, there is a video right here about what happened to the British High Street. Subscribe for more.